is going to be the star of the day, and this will be recorded for if you want to go back and check it out later. It will be up on Community's website. Before we get totally started, I did want to say that for those of you joining us from the Pacific Rim, we will be at API Days in Australia on September 14th and 15th in Melbourne, and we will be API World and API Days London October 25th through 27th. And with that, I will turn it over to Aaron.
Thanks, Bill. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I want to start in the documentation page. When we release a new version, which we just have, which is 10.1 CR2, this is the most important page. And I know we all like to not read documentation, but if you're going to not get caught out by changes and things that happen that we can't avoid, they're going to be in here. So always a good place to go. Always a place to have a good look at. We're going to just briefly look at what we've released this week. Kind of good time in this office hours, along with our release of CR2 on Tuesday. So CR2 has provided a whole load of things. You'll see them in here. Some library updates and things like that we obviously like to keep up to date with for a performance and security perspective. But some really cool features in here, and we're going to delve into a couple of those features that are related to some work we've been doing, and that's around this kind of web, the idea of dynamic keys and certificates, and being able to do that from using variables. So we'll look at those. I encourage you to go and look at the release notes for CR2. There's some things in there that I think will make a real difference to some of our customers that have been building policy and running gateways for a while, and there's some new exciting features. I also wanted to bring your attention, if you scroll right down to the bottom of this, there's something new happened from this release, and you'll see here we've got non-GA features in Gateway version 10.1 CR2. So one of the things we're trying to do, I'll come back to this screen in a second, is follow more of a progressive delivery model for our features. Whenever you do development work, there is obviously the validation phase, and you build new features. We speak to as many customers as we can. And if we work with our heads down in isolation, even speaking to a certain amount of customers through that, you release the feature, and then there are things that aren't quite right, or were misinterpreted, or things have changed. And also, our customers don't get the value of those things as quick as we would like them to do. So from this release, we're following what we call the progressive delivery of API and features, and we will be tagging some of our features with experimental, preview, and limited availability. So the definitions are in there. You can see them. Some of them are going to be, kind of in the build. If I go back to the previous tab, this WebSockets message preview feature is actually in CR2. So if you install CR2, you'll be able to get to it. The experimental feature of GraphQL schema validation assertion is not in the product. And for certain features like that, we will actually be using our Broadcom community site to be sharing those and offering support for those and interacting with customers and partners who are using those. So I recommend you keep an eye on the communities. I recommend you read the release notes and the new features. And we will also do a good job, or as good a job as we can, on our office hours to call those features and things out, because we're not putting them out there to hide them. We're putting them out there because we want validation and feedback and an interaction with you for that. So what we're going to look at today in office hours is actually listed here as some new options in the routing assertion and the encode and decode JSON web token. So to do that, I'm going to open up Policy Manager. You see I've got two policy managers here because I wanted to be able to show you the difference between the old and the new. And we'll start with the old, obviously. So the requirement for this feature has been there a while, I would say. When you use the routing assertion, let me go here. When you use the routing assertion, if you put HTTPS in your URL, you can right click here and you can select your private key. And you can use the default, or you can, choose any key that's been provided into your, or loaded into your key store or generated in your key store. And that's absolutely fine for, one-to-one or one-to-two communication. So in this example, you'll see we've got, 3 different providers. So depending on some sort of parameter that comes into the policy, we're making that backend call with, a different key. And if I just look in my key store, just to show you private keys, you'll see that I've got a number of those keys in there. And just to, for anyone that's less experienced with Policy Manager, I will show you making a call to that policy. Oh, actually, before I make that call to that policy, the back end that I've got here, this could be, let's say you're in the financial industry, this could be different banks that you need to provide a different key to. It could be different services. In our case, it's an easy for me policy. So we've got policy here that just simply requires that client cert authentication, and actually then returns back the ID from the certificate actually of who authenticated. So if I go to Postman and look at the old way of doing this, you'll see if I send into my TLS chooser service, I send in ID 1, I get back the provider, the certificate that was used. If I switch to 3, I get that provider. So that was how it's worked for many years. It's useful, it's powerful, but when we get to more complex environments, and one of our internal customers actually has policy where they've got this sort of logic drilled out into 30 or more providers, or maybe they need to be more dynamic, we wanted to make some changes, and we realized to do that we needed to be able to not only choose it dynamically, but be able to manage that within the policy. So if I go to my new gateway, CR2 gateway, you'll see I've got the same TLS service here, but I've also got a dynamic caller policy. So it looks quite similar. Let me just open it all up. So we've still got checking for variables, checking for the input parameter, and then choosing a provider. But we actually choose that provider or that key as part of a variable. So we set a variable of our choice to provider 1, and just to marry that up again, if I go into the private keys, what we're actually choosing is the alias of the key that's in our key store here. And then when I get to the HTTPS routing assertion, I can right click, and as well as the previous options I had, I now have the use a private key, and in there I put the variable that I've assigned. So exactly the same functionality, but even in this simple example, I've cut down my policy and my complexity of routing assertions, etc., by using the dynamic key. And if I go to my Postman just to prove that it works, I can send here to my my dynamic policy. I can get back number 1. I'll change it to 2 this time. I can get back number 2. So that's the first step in what was always, it's been a requirement for a little while. I know our internal customer is going to be very happy at having that. But there are a couple of other places we have taken it, and we can take it further in the future with some other assertions that use it. So the second part of any mutual TLS connection, obviously, we have to present a certificate, but as we make an HTTP call, we might want to accept the certificate that's there. So again, if I just nip back to the old world and look at this routing assertion and open it up, in the connections tab, I can say which trusted certificates I use. So I can say I trust all the certificates in the certificate store, or I can add one, and I can go off and I can look at the ones that are in here and do that from there. Again, fine for a very small, non-complex scenario, but you might want to do that dynamically with some policy logic of which certificates you're going to trust at the back end. So in the new shut that down. In the new routing assertion, again, we can click on open the properties. We now have, actually, let me just show this in this policy. So here we've got two variables. One is the key, so that's the key that we're going to use to present ourselves for the mutual TLS, and one is certs I like. And if I open up this routing assertion, you'll see I've used that in the trusted certs tab. So I now have the ability to trust only the specific TLS certs via this context variable. So certs I like are in there. And certs I like is set to provider 2. That's not actually the cert that I'm going to get when I hit the back end. So if I actually make this call, it should fail. Yep, and it does. And if I go back in, I can then change this variable to localhost, which is, I believe, the cert that the back end is showing. And it now works. And it's returning provider 2 because that's how I'm presenting myself in that mutual TLS conversation. So really, as the use of TLS and keys to manage those certificates have become more and more popular, policy has become harder to manage without being able to do that dynamically. So, we've realized that can be done in a number of places. HTTP routing assertion is definitely the first one we would look at, and that feature now is in CR2. We will be looking at some other assertions as well, but one we've already tackled and released is the JOT assertion. So let me just open the whole thing up here. So it works in a very similar way. So you'll see here I've got key 1 and key 2 set as variables that I might use. I can use whatever policy logic I want to decide that they get set. And then when I use the encode JSON web token, when I do signing, for instance, I can actually choose private key alias as a variable and pull that in. I can do the same on the decode assertion as well. So if I open the decode assertion here, you'll see I'm using the same key. Actually, if I did that with different keys, it would actually fail and we'd see an error message. So the JWT, I think it actually could even be more dynamic than and more logic driven than some of the routing assertion. So it's really a great feature, I think, and it's going to save a few lines of policy and a few lines of things that you have to manage going forward. So that's kind of where we are right now. We have some other places where we want to put that. For instance, we have the HTTP2 assertion. We have the web sockets, and there are a few other places where keys are used. And we will be looking for feedback from how this is done and looking for other places where our customers want us to do that. HTTP2 and WebSockets already on our backlog. May or may not make it into the next PI, but we wanted to release these ones as soon as possible because we thought they're the most valuable. So fairly quick demo. Wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. If you're doing anything like that in policy, I think that's going to remove some headaches that you've maybe had for a little while, and hopefully that's valuable. So yeah, any questions from anyone? I've just seen there's a couple in the chat. So yep, sorry it's taken so long. It's one of those things that will help definitely with encapsulated assertions and policy reuse. So yeah, glad of those comments from Maurizio and Remco on the chat. Anybody else got any specific questions about this feature or anything else that they saw in the CR2 list? Nope. Okay, hopefully it's fairly straightforward. We will be putting some videos, how-to videos on our IMS Academy, if you're not familiar with that. I know there's several links on the community site. So we'll be posting some how-to videos on that, as well as some of the other CR2 features within the next week or so. Yeah, so I guess, office hours is always supposed to be an open forum. We present a topic and then we open it up. So if there are no questions on specifically what we've shown here, are there any other questions or topics that people want to talk about now or ask us to do on, next month or the upcoming month's calls? Any topics at all?
Okay, I promised you one.
Okay.
It's really the crypto certificate that for CCJ expires in December.
Yep.
And I've got people who don't understand what this is. And they've asked me what's the plan to upgrade to one that's got a current certificate.
Yeah, so we've been looking at that and and prodding the provider of that for a little while. I actually think we got an update yesterday on this, Philip. So we will, we were a little concerned that the providers kind of release date for their newer version or their newer certification was going to be so close to the end. So we have definitely had an update and a little bit of good news on that there's going to be an option for us. We just now need to make sure we can first of all interpret that news is as good as it sounds, and then get that into our next set of work as we start PI 32 in a few weeks' time. So PI 31 in a few weeks' time. So look out for an update on that. I think it's important to a lot of people, Philip. So I will find out the news, build our plan, and then hopefully I can put that into a community post or something like that, and I'll update you specifically as you asked the question. So yeah, hopefully we've got some good news that I literally got off a plane at end of yesterday and trying to catch up with email from being at a Gartner event for 3 days. So I will make sure I process that and share it with everybody in the community.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions or recommendations for the next office hours? Any topics that have been on your list? If not, we will work with the community site and some ideas that we've seen on there, and try and pull something else together. And like I said, I'd love a list of suggestions from everyone. If they want anything, let me know. If not, I guess the office hours today is an office half hour, Bill, and we can end the call there.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next month.